In the 1950s, a young filmmaker named John Marshall introduced a culture that was largely unknown to the Western world. They are the Juntwasi, also known as the Kalahari Bushmen.
Oma Tsamko was called Stumpy because he was short and strong. He lived at a place called Gaucha in a region called Nwantne or Nainai in the northern Kalahari Desert. I was 18 when I met Oma in 1951. In those days, Oma and his people were independent and self-sufficient because Nainai was isolated and remote. He and his people hunted game with tiny poisoned arrows. Sometimes they ate meat. Mainly they survived on bush foods. They dug roots. They picked berries. They gathered nuts. They call themselves Juntwasi. My name is John Marshall, and throughout the 1950s, I filmed the people in their hunting-gathering life in Nainai. When Oma gave me his name, he said my face was too long. I called him my big name. He called me Oma Khosi, Oma Longface. In 1958, the South African government kicked me out of Nainai for supporting Juntwasi. It was 20 years before I was allowed back to Nainai. I met my big name at a place called Chumkwi.
As these excerpts from his documentary demonstrate, John Marshall's chronicle of the Juntwasi people became more than the study of another culture. For Marshall, it was a journey of self-discovery that changed his life forever. Such an exploration is the essence of anthropology. Who are we? Where did we come from? And what exactly does it mean to be human?
Anthropology, by definition, is a study of people, but it's a big study of people. It's the study of human beings in their cultural behavior, in their biological essence. It's the study of people in the past and in the present. The goal of anthropology is to understand the human experience, to understand our evolutionary history, to understand what it means to be a human being, what sets us apart from other animals, from other organisms, but also how do we fit into the world of nature. What is the whole experience of being a human being?
To answer such questions, anthropology is set apart from other scientific disciplines by taking a holistic perspective.
And what we mean by that is that it encompasses many different areas of study. If we were going to study a group of humans who lived in the Amazon forest, let's say, we might first of all be interested in the physical adaptations that these people might have had. If they lived in the Amazon rainforest for perhaps thousands of years, they would be adjusted to the humidity and the temperature, and they would be adjusted physiologically to the types of food that are available and those kinds of things. Then we'd want to know about their history. We'd want to know, do they have legends or myths about why they lived there or where they came from? What is their religion? Do they engage in warfare with other groups? Do they have peaceful trading? Do they intermarry between groups? The more we delve into learning about these people, the more holistic the study becomes.
The science of anthropology uses what's called the four fields approach, comprised of physical, cultural, archaeological, and linguistic disciplines. Each of these subfields is crucial to our understanding of what it means to be a human being. For example, physical anthropology traces our biological origins, evolutionary development, and genetic diversity.
Biological or physical anthropologists are deeply interested in the person as a biological organism. What is the evolutionary history of humans? How do humans adapt physiologically to their environment? And why are humans so diverse in their physical appearance? Why do we have different colors of skin and hair and eyes? Why are we differently shaped in terms of being tall or short?
One subfield of physical anthropology is forensic anthropology, the identification of human skeletal remains for law enforcement authorities.
Forensic anthropologists are also nowadays working with human rights organizations trying to identify skeletal remains from mass graves that have been the result of genocides in various parts of the world.
In 2006, the newly installed Iraqi government gathered a case against Saddam Hussein for atrocities committed against 148 Shiite villagers in 1982. A team of anthropologists from the United States assembled to examine evidence recovered from a mass grave in the Dushail region north of Baghdad.
What a forensic archaeologist or anthropologist is doing is basically detective work. When people are shot, there's a lead trail left through the bones. So sometimes that can be an important line of evidence in showing shot patterns and things like that. But then also with the clothing, which also demonstrates shot patterns. One of the big things that you're doing in a forensic case is telling a story, and clothing, in some cases even more so than the bones, clothing and personal effects does tell the story of ethnic identity, gender, age, and things like that.
The forensic evidence gathered by the team was integral to the conviction of the former Iraqi dictator, and Saddam Hussein was sentenced to death in 2006. Another subfield of physical anthropology, paleoanthropology, investigates human origins through the study of fossils. For example, by comparing the size and shape of these fossils to one another and to the bones of living species, paleoanthropologists are reconstructing the course of human evolutionary history.
Paleoanthropology is the study of humans in the past. A paleoanthropologist would be involved in looking at the human evolutionary record of humans and their relatives. So, for example, a paleoanthropologist might work in Olduvai Gorge or work in other places in Africa where some of the most ancient fossils have been recovered. And through their work, they try to reconstruct the evolutionary history of humans and their ancestors.
When you do field work in paleoanthropology, to do it well and to get the most possible information out of your field research, you need to bring all these people together. You have the paleontologist, you have the anatomist, you have the geologist, you have the archaeologist, you've got the person who's an expert on dating techniques, the person who's an expert on fossil fish. You've got the person who's an expert on how to conserve fossils or an expert on a particular kind of mammal evolution. All these people are in the field. That's where the exciting stuff happens in science. It's not in the center of science of any particular field. It's where different fields bump into each other and find common cause. That, to me, that's paleoanthropology in a nutshell.
As paleoanthropologists unearth the fossilized records of human ancestors, They hope to learn how biology interacted with the culture of these ancient peoples. That is, they take a biocultural approach.
Anthropology is biocultural. What we mean by that is that in order to get a full understanding of the human experience, we need to look at both the cultural aspects of humans and we need to look at the biological aspects of humans. A great example would be the example of food. Food is certainly something that everyone needs for nutrition, for growth and development and reproduction. So without food, we can't survive. But getting food for humans is not just a matter of using our instinctual drives and finding food in the environment. For humans, food becomes something that's very much involved with culture. Our culture tells us what kind of food is appropriate. Our culture tells us how we should cook it. Our culture may tell us that certain foods are forbidden, and we even may make stories and rituals having to do with preparing or eating the food. So food is much more than simply only a cultural thing, and it's not just a biological thing. It's something that works together in a biocultural way.
Another subfield of anthropology is archaeology, which studies human cultures through the recovery and analysis of artifacts. Scientists then interpret this fragmentary but fascinating record to reassemble both existing and forgotten ways of life.
Archaeologists are always interested in what happened in the past. This could be the recent past, or it could be very ancient past. For example, in northern Nevada, there were many mining towns in the 19th century, and historic archaeologists may excavate in mining towns and combine what they find in the ground with historic documents and so on to try to get a picture of what was happening 100 years ago or 150 years ago. On the other hand, other people may be excavating nearby, also in northern Nevada, looking for Paleo-Indian artifacts, whether it be thousands of years ago or just a few hundreds of years ago.
Our history is not only found in material remains, it is also translated through the written and spoken word. Linguistic anthropology is the study of human language, language being the most distinctive feature of the human species.
Language is a system of symbols with which we transmit our culture. So in order to study culture, we need to also consider language. A linguistic anthropology might be interested in how culture affects language performance. For example, how is one polite or rude in a particular cultural context? How does one tell stories? What's the right way to communicate certain wants and needs in a culturally appropriate way? Linguistic studies could also look at non-verbal communication, such as how close you stand to one another, whether you look directly in someone's eyes, and all those kinds of things.
Another branch is cultural anthropology, which studies historical and modern-day human societies in all parts of the world. As one might expect, cultural anthropologists focus on culture, a society's shared behaviors and perceptions. Culture represents the entire database of a society's knowledge and diverse ways of viewing and interacting with the world, which have been transmitted from one generation to the next, non-genetically, apart from DNA, through words, concepts, and symbols. The work that cultural anthropologists often do is called an ethnography, a detailed description of a particular culture. John Marshall's remarkable examination of the Juntwasi people is a classic example of an ethnography. After returning to Nainai in 1978, Marshall found that life for the Juntwasi had changed dramatically. No longer hunter-gatherers, they now worked for white South African ranchers for small wages.
At their settlement of huts, a quarter-mile from downtown Chunkwe, the family threw a party for me. I remembered old dancing at Gaucha when the women gathered ole berries on wet, green summer afternoons. When they turned off their boombox and made their own music, it was all new to me. It was inevitable that they would never live the life their parents lived. Change would come to Nai. We just didn't realize how much, or how soon, or how fast.
For Marshall, the ethnography of the Juntwasi spanned decades and involved extensive fieldwork or on-location research. Living with the culture and documenting their life was often difficult for Marshall. When a baby is near death, Marshall does not understand why the family won't seek help from the nearby clinic.
Rather than just sitting back and watching people do things, perhaps one way to learn more information is to actually get in there and participate as much as you're allowed to.
A common tool utilized by ethnographers is participant observation, which is a research strategy used to learn about a culture through social participation and personal observation. Strategies such as these enable anthropologists to avoid perspectives that are culture-bound, that is, theories of the world that are based on the assumptions and values of one's own culture. Over the course of his many trips to study the Juntwasi, John Marshall became more than just an ethnographer. His friendship with the Juntwasi embedded him into their culture.
When anthropologists do ethnography, they may live with a group of people for many months or even as long as a year. And over the course of that time, they come to know the people in a personal way.
But the popularity of Marshall's films from the 1950s had an unintended consequence. The images of the Juntwasi as hunter-gatherers wearing skins had popularized a myth that they were still hunter-gatherers and could sustain their futures in this way.
The information that anthropologists get can be very sensitive in a number of ways. For example, if the group being studied is a small group of indigenous people within a nation, it's conceivable that the information that the anthropologist obtains could be sold or given to a more powerful entity, such as the government.
In part, due to John Marshall's 1950s films, the Namibian government wanted to exploit the Juntwasi. Revenues from the tourist industry and international filmmakers were better served if the Juntwasi returned to roaming the bush.
I wasn't so keen on having film I shot in the 1950s influencing planning in the 1990s. Even if they could survive, who would want to go back to the old life? Should boys spend their youth learning to shoot little arrows and track wild game? Or go to school?
Wie van julle het al 'n buffel gesien? Niemand nie.
Only a generation ago, Nai was isolated and remote. Now the Juntwasi are impacted daily by the outside world through globalization, a worldwide interconnectedness that is evidenced through global movements of natural resources, trade goods, human labor, finance capital, information, and infectious diseases. Globalization very often results in conflict, as John Marshall witnessed when he returned to Nainai in 1978.
When he went back in 78 with that PBS film crew to make Nye, and he saw what happened to the people that he loved, boy, there was no going back.
When Longface came back after many years, he saw how much we had changed. He filmed as frantically as ever. My father was the head of the Juntwa Council. He tried to lead, but too many bad things were happening. People like Tuka and Twa were always drinking and fighting, and there were worse things in Tsumkwe than fighting. There was TB and every kind of illness. Babies died. Women grieved when their men died.
Desperate for a better way to live, in the early 1980s, the family headed back to their homeland with plans to raise cattle and start farming. But they were confronted with government opposition.
What are you doing here? What am I doing here? I'm helping people make farms. That's what I'm doing. I'm helping people keep their land. That's what I'm doing.
Over the next decade and a half, John Marshall continued his documentation of the cultural transformation of the Juntwasi. He also remained committed to helping the Juntwasi achieve their dreams of economic independence as cattle herders and farmers. As anthropologists study people all over the world, globalization is an area of intense research. Do communities embrace products and ideas from other cultures? Or does this interconnectedness cause upheaval? One area of research involves examining how immigrants to the United States adapt to new systems, such as information, education, and healthcare. Healthcare provider Kaiser Permanente hired anthropologists to help launch what it calls culturally competent care. For example, changing immigrant demographics even influenced the design of Kaiser's new facility in East Los Angeles.
We had reached the point where 80% of our population was Latino and about 10% was Chinese. So when the opportunity came to rebuild the clinic, we used anthropologic concepts to construct even the architectural facades, so that we wanted to make it a safe an environment that people would be comfortable from the cultures that we were about to try to take care of. We incorporated a lot of pots and a lot of artwork that kind of reflected the immigrant populations that we would be serving.
But Kaiser's program goes beyond design and decor. Health practitioners like Dr. Miza are given specific information about the immigrant cultures they are likely to encounter, information that affects how they treat their patients.
You need to know what country and under what situation they came here. If you came here because you were persecuted and tortured, as in Honduras or in other countries of Latin America where they had dictatorships and so forth, and they were tortured, that's going to be a different worldview. So socioeconomic status is really important. Political situations, how people got here, religious are very important too. These are all factors that make up one's cultural makeup, and you need to have that information to do proper care.
Using anthropological knowledge in this manner to solve practical problems is called applied anthropology.
Some applied anthropologists work with immigrant groups, and many of the people that come to the United States come from a tradition of medicine that's quite different from what most Americans would think of as standard medicine.
Some people really believe in cold-hot theory, yin-yang. In Mexico, people in Latin America, they do believe that certain illnesses are hot and certain illnesses are cold, and if you mix things, if you drink a cold beer or cold Coca-Cola on the wrong day, that you can get a cold. You'll see this all over the world. We ask, how do you view this illness? Where did you think you got this illness from? Because that gives us tremendous insight. If you start telling me, well, it was because somebody gave me a bad look, or because I didn't do this, or because I was a bad person, that's tremendous insight to a physician, because that's your reality.
What we think is a reality that's tied to our cultural beliefs. And we have to understand that other people have a different way of looking at reality that is just as real to them based on their cultural background, their cultural beliefs. And so if nothing else, I think anthropology can contribute to this, the knowledge that we must learn to understand the way we think in different parts of the world.
Though anthropology began by studying societies and cultures that were very different from those in the West, it has grown into a more holistic, multidisciplinary science with much wider and all-encompassing interests and applications. But always, its goal is to offer a way of looking at and understanding all people of the world, and to advance the discovery and depth of what it means to be a human being.